Hi, everybody. Welcome to the new normal. I am your host, Lisa Davis, aka Litecoin Lisa, and I cannot even wipe the smile off my face. I'm so excited. We've got some breaking news for you today. Things are happening, and it's Woo Woo Wednesday. So I've got my buddy, the Public Awakening, with us, and I have a new friend that I met when I was out in Phoenix with Bix and Amy. It's actually one of Joshy's friends. Ben, you guys will get to know him as the Skull Cap Savant. He's got an amazing channel on YouTube as well as streaming over on Theta. He's going to tell us more about that and the art of stenography. I think I'm saying that right. We're going to learn about that and a lot more right after this. Welcome to the show, both of you. Public, good to see you again.
Good to see you too. I missed you guys this past weekend. It looked like a whole ton of fun.
We had a great time this weekend.
Awesome.
Yeah. And Ben, great to see you again. I got to meet you out in Phoenix with
hello.
the whole Weir crew. So the Road to Ruta crew. And I really got really excited when you started talking about the stenography thing. So Public introduced me to gematria, which is, I guess, somewhat similar to the stenography, or you were explaining that they could be used together. I do want to touch on some of the current event stuff. I don't know if it would be better to talk about that first.
Well, it is probably wise to establish a framework and understanding what it's actually stenography is a much more
Steganography. I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong.
Steganography.
Stegosaurus. Got to remember these ways.
Stegosaurus. The hard G in there somewhere is a differentiator. But gematria is the ancient Kabbalistic practice of encoding harmonic frequencies such that they can be represented by way of number, by way of language, by way of anything that we can express with our throat chakra or etc. But it's an expression of of frequency matching. And what is done in the practice is you take that frequency and you tie it, the harmonic of it, to a character to be used in a specific way. In the case of language, it's letters in the alphabet. And fast forward through the use of this is kind of like, if you can think of how a spell book might be constructed of the key harmonics to make a spell happen. That's kind of what gematria is the underlayment of. So if you're going to cast a spell, which is, it's just all wordplay, right? Spelling. What do we do with words? We spell them. It's
good point.
Magic is language at the core of it. That's where influence all derives from. So if you can attach key harmonics to those characters and arrange them in certain ways, spell words, sentences, rituals, it's like kind of like the core building blocks of it, I guess. And gematria is a way to decode what's happening there and identify those markers. And there are calculators out there that reduce this down into simplistically arranging characters in the English alphabet into different ciphers that sometimes have a lot to do with harmonics, sometimes not. A lot of the base ciphers of the English language that you'll find, they're just 1 equals A, 2 equals B, 3 equals C, right? Like really simple ciphers. But the more complex, like Sumerian and septenary and Greek and Hebrew ciphers, those get further and further back into the ancient times, and you get different coded values for things. What you're looking for when you're decoding things like gematria are these patterns, these sacred number patterns. 33 is often thought of, the 33 steps in the Freemason hierarchy.
Yeah.
The 33 vertebra of the spine is why that matters. It's because it's a study of the metaphysics of the person, and the 33 in the spine is why that matters actually. And this is why that number has a lot to do with Christ and a whole host of other things. But you look for these patterns as they're used. Like 137 is the 33rd prime. So if a letter or a word or something is coded that way, you can match it to 33 in some harmonic fashion, because 33 is not represented directly but indirectly by the prime. So this is actually where you start to get into blurring that line between gematria as a codification template, and then steganography as like a cryptographic practice where you use the gematria principles to build a larger construct of symbolism around. It's like in software programming, altering something that is a container such that you know that it's even in the container and other people don't know it's in a container. Like watermarking is a really simple example of this. If you do it well enough, people won't even know it's there. You have to even have a tool like a blacklight to look at it, right? Even like your driver's license. That's a form of steganography. Steganography is removing perceptive qualities of the thing that you're trying to interpret, such that only a certain amount of people that are going to have the decoder ring are going to be able to decipher the message, just kind of like the Ovaltine thing in Christmas Story, right?
Yeah.
It's really a crummy commercial.
Yeah. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
As a practice? So that's really all steganography is it's this practice of taking other things. Gematria is one input you can use, but Herodotus in the histories describes steganography in simple terms. And I think in my researches, it appears this may have some sort of connection, funny enough, to the steganography of the White Rabbit. This may be the first instance where like the follow the white rabbit term comes from, because Herodotus describes like a certain form of steganography for passing messages along in ancient Greek times where we don't have a digital age. But maybe I think as it goes, he paints a picture of maybe there's a person inside of a city wall you might be hostile to, and their guards might kill you on sight. But to make no mistake, there's a message that you've got to get inside, right?
That's literally the podcast that I just saw the other day. Was this Herodotus podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it was a fool and his money. And it was talking about, basically they were talking about, well, they went into what money is. I would love to unpack that one.
Yeah. Giordano Bruno's work is really what to unpack if you want to know what money is. That gets into the metaphysics of it pretty deeply, but it is.
Well, this one talks about that, how he talked about how King Midas was like, tortured by touching gold. He lost his daughter from it, all that. And so he goes to wash in or he's told to wash in the river, and then it goes into the river. And then they talk about how there's this device or thing in the river called electronium or something that sounded like electronium. I've been in crypto too long, so now everything sounds like a cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
But I swear it was something like electronium that turns the gold into coins, because people couldn't identify or value the gold. And so they needed it to be turned into coins to be able to recognize or identify it, to validate it. And I thought, oh, that's like veritasium or something. Like it was this whole, I don't know, it was this really wild podcast by this.
Yeah. I mean, if it's like electrum that they're talking about, that's actually just electrum. That's an alloy that you make by, what is it? Is it combining? It's not gold with silver. It's gold with like tin or something, or
something.
Yeah, it's an alloy of gold in some sort of a way. So yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to look into that because the context I'm not familiar with on that particular anecdote, actually.
Yeah. I'll send you that podcast. I just thought it's one of those things where when you hear something that seems like a message, and then there's another, there's these promoted tweets that I see sometimes that seem to be some kind of messaging where they'll have like the capitalized letter. And I know in your podcast, you were talking about in the Putin message, there was all those capital V's. They were talking about Venezuela, or they were talking about I don't even know what all else.
Vladivostok. I mean,
everything was a V. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what you
even
specialize in.
Sputnik V. That's what you look for specifically when you key in on the decoder portion. Is all it really is. Like magic is cast classically. If you go back to Druids and the Ogham language, which is the Nordic script. And funny enough, the Nordic script is everywhere, all over the ancient United States territories prior to Spain, prior to everybody. This is actually kind of what some of the V steganography paints the picture of, is the lost history. It is, to understand what it conveys, let's get a little bit more foundation, because this will make sense. But it's a glyph. It's straight lines. Okay. There are certain letters in our alphabet that actually match back in terms of the way they look, in terms of the symbol itself. It might not sound the same phonetically. It might not be used in the same context, but the look of it would be literally the same as ancient times. And these are the letters that are straight lined, straight edged. The letter I, for instance, without the dot on it, or V, W, X, Z. These all have straight, hard lines like the Ogham language did, and they match up in certain corollaries to the way that magic is used. So most typically, the way I look for magic being cast is to look for those letters being used in some sort of mysterious way. Even the letter Z on the side of the Russian tanks and stuff lately, they're trying to ban that. They're really, really adamant right now about banning anybody using Z in Germany as a support system, right?
Well, Junior's tattoo is a Z with a big dagger through it.
Yes, it
and
is.
then recently I saw this promoted tweet that was there was like these individuals, and they were standing there, and then there's a van pulls up, and there's like military guys, but they're not military. Maybe they're more like mercenary guys, and they jump out and they link arms with the individuals, and then all of a sudden they're like getting in a line, and they make a Z with a dot on top. And I was looking at it, and that's the Polish letter for Z. And if you think about what's happening right now and where it's happening and all that, it just makes me wonder if that's associated with that somehow.
Well, here's how to start picking it apart. You're onto something. This is likely steganography being conveyed to the tune of Z. I don't do as much work on it. I've done some in the past. But V has always been more interesting to me, because here's how steganography works. It's again, to packet a piece of information in a secret way that only you can decode if you know the rules. And you can read the message though. But here's kind of how it works. You start with V because that's a glyph. In the classical sense, it's been used. It's been used as a meme for a really long time, is what gives it the most power, because there's a resonant psychic, let's say, harmonic thing that's left over in the genetic memory of people, that's left over in places from ancient times. So the older stuff is, I have found, the more likely it is to be a more powerful magic object. And so you start with it, if it's ancient in nature, as your starting point if you're going to cast a spell or convey information, which is really all we're talking about. So in the case of V, it already has an advantage of being the straight edge thing, but it also has been used in so many different ways over the course of time. It's also the Roman numeral character for the number 5, right? So that's another way you can use it. So you can interpret things like the number 5 and V as a correlated similarity. You can take that even further, and this will get really interesting for you. I'm sure, Lisa, you just take it to Hebrew, right? Say, okay, what's the 5th letter in the character in the Hebrew alphabet? And you go and you cross relate this, and you get the letter He, or the character of He, which when you look at it, it looks like a number 17 is what it looks like.
Oh, really?
It isn't the number 17, but if you were
But
to
it
draw a
looks
1
like
and a
one.
7, it looks
Okay.
like it. Okay, so do you see like how deep
Yeah.
you can start to
It
get this
rhymes.
stuff?
It's like when
Yes.
history rhymes or when a story, it rhymes. Yeah.
That's right.
It's that kind
It
of
also
thing.
extends that's just to follow like a key decoding pathway or framework in order to transpose characters. You can also think about it philosophically, metaphorically, symbolically. So what does 5 represent in terms of V? Okay, we're at the number 5. Well, 5 is really key to being the number of man because we have 5 digits on our hand. We have 5 limbs, including our head, right? The classic Leonardo da Vinci representation of the human being. The pentagram is a sacred system of angular geometry that's used in these senses, and is also the number of senses we have, or that is acknowledged that we have in popular science. Right. And so since that's even if we have more senses than that, because I would argue the higher states of functioning, actually, you can break down into even more senses than we acknowledge. But just from the classical sense, if we're only talking about 5, that's the popular consciousness, and you can use something that has control over the number 5, you can start to see how you can twist this very glyph to cast spells over the senses. So in a way, you start to see when you're painting these patterns together, with the inclusion of V, I've found an immense amount of suggestion of it being this coded messaging that is used in the mind control realm. So if you're a CIA MK Ultra operative and you need to pass a message along to somebody unsuspectingly, and you even transpose, like, let's say you use the word crude, C-R-U-D-E. You see a lot of the times, even in the ancient texts, you see the letter U and the letter V actually being transposed. So you could misspell the word C-R-V-D-E to a constituent, and it might mean something very specific. And you might have a whole lexicon and a key that you can decode this message with if sent correspondence in this way. And so you can start either passing information with this along, or you can start, this is the way spells work, including it in the plain sight of people to make that spell mean something to them, because it won't have an effect unless you show them the spell. So anytime you start to see V, or even its inverse form in the Greek sense, the letter lambda, because it's the same glyph inversed, you can start to see with inclusion of various.
So it could even be A, like you could even use A as a upside down V.
Yeah, let's here's a fun thing to get into here. This is kind of the year of V, because V is also the 22nd letter of the alphabet. Okay. So when you see 22 included places, okay, so here's an instance of how the senses in a movie that Pixar created recently, and how even the movie industry uses this stuff. So there's this movie called Soul that Pixar made, and there's a character in there.
Is this the most recent one? I'm hearing a lot of parents saying
most recent. It came out during COVID, so it's pretty recent.
Okay,
but it's not the most recent. But there's a character in this movie called 22, and you'll see this kind of thing all wrapped up. And what she is afraid of in the movie is having senses. That's the whole fear of her manifesting in a life on Earth, is the senses, and she's afraid of it. And her name is 22. So you see what's happening here is there are people at Pixar that understand this coded language, and they're naming the character representations in the movies to convey a message to those who know how to see, or to cast a spell, either or, right? It's kind of how steganography is used. It's either to encode a secret message to pass correspondence to people that you want to encode it, or it's used for, thievery and all manner of spy tactics and stuff. But we have,
like any tool, I guess you can use it for darkness,
yes,
good or evil,
and this is where we're getting to with your mention of the letter A. We just had this event with the Oscars happen, right? If you pull up the logo of the Oscars, instead of the letter A this year, because it's the year of V, they've included, it's a lambda instead. It's of a letter A, and they put the little statue in the middle of it. And in most of the representations, the lambda is pointing directly at the number 22 in the logo structure of it. And so when I saw that logo, in the days leading up, I was like, oh, there's going to be something that happens here. And sure enough, there it was. And there's the logo right there, but there's a lot to be said for the, where they include 22, like the 2022 Oscars above it. The lambda is oftentimes it's pointing directly at it. So in this way, they're saying, we've captivated your senses, which is entertainment does. And we are playing a trick on them in the way that this ritual may convey. And when these things are included, it's a marker that the viewer can take to verify whether something is rigged or ritualized or not, quite frankly. Because most of the time in these rituals for our senses, to trick our senses, like a form of mind control, you'll find the lambda or the V very present.
Well, and look at the stage, looks like an eye.
Looks like an aperture, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. The first thing I thought of when I saw, I didn't watch it, but obviously everybody heard about that stupid slapping incident. Yeah. It was like the talk of everything for a while. My first thought on that was one of their shaming rituals. Chris Rock must have done something wrong, and that's part of their public shaming rituals. And you're bringing up all these other occult things that are in these ceremonies. We all know about the Super Bowl and basically every other primetime thing is full of it. And this one I didn't know of. This is very interesting that what you're saying plays into this. This is certainly another thing that I'm going to keep an eye on and try and figure out as I go along. Well,
this is one way to think about even like Chris Rock in terms of like Steganography. And I'm not saying, but this is how it works. And this is kind of how you wordplay with the things in Spitball. But we have Black Rock. Chris is black. His last name is Rock. About to get smashed in the market. So this is always kind of the stuff that I put my head through the filter of when the rituals happen, because it's really the steganography of it all that gives you kind of like this perspective to consider it, right? And what is Will Smith? And you're right about the shaming thing too, by the way. I actually thought more about it being a shaming thing for Will Smith, rather it being shaming, because it reminded me of the whole Tiger Woods thing more than anything, like the wife situation. Right. It's this whole like subservience to the woman, which is not the goddess energy. It's this succubus, terribly reversed energy. And I mean, it's also been said that everybody's very confused about this because he was laughing, and then they also remembered, oh, there was this thing 2 years ago where he was on a podcast with her and she outed to him on the podcast that she was openly cheating on him, and this is a polyamorous relationship and this is just what I'm doing, and that was directed at Will Smith in some way to shame him at the beginning of this. But
Sean talked about it on the show yesterday.
So it may have been this 2-year shaming thing, and ever since then, to get shamed in that way, all of Will Smith's contract deals just kept going up and up and up and up and up. All these huge blockbuster things, and the Disney thing, and the Discovery thing, and etc. Best actor now, and this happened with the Tiger Woods arc too. The shaming ritual, a couple of years in what do you call it? In exile, and then he comes back and wins majors again, better than before. It's and so.
Very interesting. Are you aware of any of the I don't know what you want to call it, the theories that are going on right now about the name Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? That was a new one that I
of course, and all of a sudden that's another marker, because now it's back in the news too, and it's a way darker show, it looks like, as well. I haven't looked too much into the particulars of it because the V steganography before the Oscars hadn't led me to, really. I thought it was interesting, but it perhaps is something that I'm going to watch. I do tend to watch my programming, literal programming, based on what I'm trying to decode from the lens of the V steganography, actually. It's all over Disney stuff in particular. It's all over Marvel stuff.
Right now, they're the big thing on Disney is they've released all this internal video chats inside Disney where they're saying by the end of this year, their goal is to have at least half of the Disney characters be LGBTQPCDABCD, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, I'm
I don't
sure.
know, lots of consonants and vowels. And so that's like all over the news everywhere. So
it's worth considering when you look at enough of it, because of the messaging that you can kind of see going back and forth. What it appears to me is that the administrative body of Disney is all this corruption. But somehow you've got this messaging sneaking it into their programming, and the inferences are very much in a pattern toward encouraging us to wake up to the ancient history of our past. Truly, in many ways. And so through this knowledge as well, I've also started to see, well, just like anything, there are probably factions right in between Disney, and there are probably those very people just using the organization to get the message out and take it down.
That's what I feel like. It's all just exposing what has always been there.
Well, it's also, it was a very different company once Michael Eisner took it over. We don't need to maybe get into like all of the Walt Disney Freemasonic connections and stuff either, but it was a different company when Walt Disney was in charge, very much so.
Well, I was telling you when we were out in Phoenix, that I was born in Lake Havasu City, and that town was designed by the same guy that designed the Disney parks. And the town, the roads are like made to get you lost. There's no like parallel north, south, east, west. It's just like spaghetti bowls, Then they have the London Bridge there that was bought and brought into Lake Havasu. There's all these, it's just outside of Vegas where they were flying people in. It's a very bizarre place, but
it is.
Yeah, it's got some Disney ties. Very strange.
That's interesting. If you haven't heard, the Prince of Bel-Air roughly translates to, they call Satan the Prince of the Air, the Prince of the Ether.
Oh yeah. That's true. I hadn't considered that connection. That's a good one.
So you have the Prince of the Ether, and Bel can also be translated into Baal, Baal. So you have basically the Prince of the Air and Baal all in one statement.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's what the interesting thing about where, like, ultimately the V-Steganography takes you on a huge journey. That's why I have 7 days worth of content that covers all this stuff that it's just playing and repeat on my Theta channel, because it takes a while to contextually get to the bottom of this stuff, but it infers an ancient past that we've lost connection with, and that there's an ancient war with a people of a different planet that's involved. You apply it back to the Babylonian epics and things, and it makes all of the sense in the world when you look at the Enuma Elish from the perspective of the five. I mean, the five is also the fifth element being the ether, the thing that's suppressed, right? The thing that's out of view of the senses. So the things that you can apply this to, it turns out, are like ancient history, all things academia, money, etheric technologies. The cross overlay with Tesla stuff is,
I was just about to say that. Yeah.
And basically the entire paradigm that is suppressed beyond our senses, and very purposefully done so, and all in this form of mind control. It's a very useful thing to be armed with the practice of this, just to like look at things in certain ways. The X is also used because of the X files in a lot of the UFO stuff, and I mean, X marks the spots. Begin the journey there, right? That you tied to the tarot as well. V, in the sense of the tarot, is the Hierophant card, and the Hierophant is the master of religion. Religion is the master of the sense, the control of the senses. It is the master of mind control. There's no form of mind control greater than religion. And there he is, the Hierophant card with his tools, and he's got the subservience there. The X is the wheel, so it's the control of time, it's the control of perception, it's the control of release, it's the control of etc. I don't need to get into a who's who in the naming convention of things, but I'm just hoping to, like, by repetition a little bit, paint a picture for people of how this stuff kind of works. You always have to be gauging your thought patterns on apophenia and pareidolia, not finding patterns that don't relate to each other. Because honestly, that is because you mentioned in that article earlier that I'd shared with you regarding Putin, Lisa.
I tried to pull it up, but you have to have like a premium platinum subscription now to see the article because it's been archived. So
Really?
my little zero hedge regular subscription, I can't even pull up the article. So thank goodness we have your video. So you can go to his channel and subscribe and watch him break this down, and go through the article, and he does the breakdown with the V steganography, and it's really incredible. And then there's lots of other videos, which I'm going to watch a lot more, but you have a link to or another article that we might be able to look at it.
The article I just gave you was the article I referenced. It's more of an essay that he wrote, and Putin therefore. But even in there, you've always got to be careful not to see the V pattern where it's not, because it's really easy to find an occurrence of things that don't relate at all. Like there are a lot of Russian V, words that just consequently begin with V. So how many of them are really tied to the messaging and how many of them are not, right? You've got to contextualize things a little bit. But I mean, here's one from Bix's realm, right? Like Vincent Viola of Virtu Financial, right? So the occurrence of the 3 5s is something that gets into occult magic too, because it's related to the number 666, which are two of the numbers that were key with the construction of the Washington Monument. It's actually 666 feet tall, but 555 feet of it are above ground.
And that's where I'll see a lot of like 5x5s, or like the other day Trump hit a hole in one, and I sent it to public and I was like, what did you see in that? And we both saw 5x5.
5x5.
And we'll see 5x5 a lot. And with the watches on a lot of the promoted tweets, they'll do Cartier watches. And there was Trump's last, when he was in Georgia, his last speaking thing, he said, I'm going to put the screws to them. And the last Cartier, which Cartier always does screws, I guess, but they had the silver screws, and there was a 5x5 on that one.
The biggest boondoggle of our age in the commercial real estate space is the 3 5s. The 3 5s real estate development company. They're the ones building these mega malls that are larger than Mall of America, and so it's and the Binance wallet that stored all of the theta. The Binance wallet that Binance had that happened to store like the world's supply of theta at some point back when it was real cheap. Remember, its final three numeric values were 555 in that wallet. So it's fun to be keyed into this stuff when you see it, and just again, naming these conventions doesn't go very deep right now in the context of what we're talking about today. But I mean, I have covered all this stuff in larger depth, and we can do it more on any particular topic in the future, depending on your appetite.
No, I love it. I could talk about this stuff for hours. I wear poor public out with all this stuff.
You've got the audience right now who's certainly hungry for it, which is awesome. Sure. No, this is really interesting, man. Honestly, I don't even want to talk much. I just want to listen to this.
Okay.
No, it's great stuff. Seriously.
Well, are you guys tracking with it before I get too off track? I mean, because I know Lisa wants to transition it toward this Vladimir Putin thing that I did a couple of years ago now, as I've been watching the wars unfold.
Yeah, I just see this applying so much to today, because I think the messaging right now is, Putin's bad and all this. But if you go back to unpacking this, and what you pulled out of this was that he was drawing attention to history's narrative, and trying to bring attention to people to say, was this written wrong? Is our history wrong? And I believe it is. I believe we've been taught the wrong thing. And so I think bringing attention to it is what's happening. And I think even with the current events that happened today, you know, Clinton and the DNC got charged from the FEC for the dossier Trump collusion. That was one of the big breaking news things today that made me smile and brighten my day. So seeing those charges, those things starting to happen, it seems like this article, which I think it said over a year ago. I'm not sure when you did.
It was almost 2 years ago now that this was hit. So okay. June of 2020.
June 2020. Okay. So he was starting to put it out in front of people and say, let's turn on our brain cells, critical thinking. What if? He wasn't I don't think he was shoving it in their face as much as a what if was my
Well, he was actually, he wasn't inflammatory in this essay, but he was very condemning to the state of what happened in the post-World War II era because of, well, first of all, he makes all but, a direct inference that it was easy to cover up a lot of their history after this point in time, 75 years ago, because so many effing people died.
Right.
They face such catastrophic losses that, and were already degraded so much from the Bolshevik Revolution that it was really easy to wipe a lot of stuff away, and even really easy then to reframe things post World War II in terms of the Anglo-Saxon history. Everything after World War II started to change. And that's really like the big like wizard or behind the curtain, moment of ours is before we can even get to the ancient past, people have got to realize that the United States didn't win World War II.
Right.
World War II wasn't even decisively concluded in my eyes.
It never ended. Yes, I agree.
And in reality, it petered out and new conflicts began. And of course we had I think I'm of Cliff's mind that the Cold War is probably World War III. But in the sense of this, we took and got infiltrated by the Khazarian Mafia, the Jesuit order. Mm-hmm. The Khazarian Mafia and the Jesuit order are both the same. Just one is the further infiltration of the Catholics after they were pre-established.
Public
and our entire government politic is composed of one or the other, basically. and so we lost to the psyop of it, but we also lost in the sense of like the kinetic aspect. This whole thing that you can go to other corners of the internet and look up further than we'll probably discuss here, but the breakaway civilization of the post-World War II Nazis, going down to Antarctica, the whole situation with Admiral Byrd getting his ass kicked with a fleet of three carriers, limped home. We lost our touch with what was after 75, prior to this 75 years anniversary period that we all kind of just went through in the 2020 reset of things. And it's something that I think Vladimir Putin is very aware of the times he's living in. I think he's also, in terms of the reset agenda, that's when he's striking with all of this language. He's a very regular, like, we have the State of the Union here once a year now, if that. And he's up there talking to the people about stuff like this all the time. Like twice a week, he's sitting up there spouting off some other think piece for people to munch on. And we just don't get the broadcasts of that stuff most of the time because Twitter.
They don't want us to know.
But he's very, very keen on, with this piece, enlightening that the history of it all is the most important thing for us to wade through the fog of. And there are even just some key facts as it relates to who needs to be honored in the war. He goes into a lot in this piece about establishing the honor for the people that died and paying a lot more respect to them before we can even move on from this. We need to respect them. We need to respect those that fell in the conflict before. This has been a hellacious thing. And Russia has gotten through it, is basically his point here. It's like, we've gotten through more hell than anybody can possibly fathom, and we're still here. And it's kind of a challenge for the rest of the world to get on his side with this manner of thinking. It's not a bold-faced challenge to world leaders or anything. It's just, it's a think piece. It's a 6-page long essay, you know, and there's plenty of the steganography peppered throughout it, as you pointed out, to suggest that he's very savvy of the mind control aspect of things at that level. So anyway, that's kind of the summary in as big of a nutshell as I can reduce it down to.
No, I appreciate it. I just added a link to this article in the description of the video if you guys want to go check it out for yourself. And I do think, you know, now they always said, you know, he who wins the war writes the history, or something like that. I'm the worst quoter ever, yeah. But something to that effect. And now we have blockchain. And so we do have this opportunity for not only our money to get fixed, but for our history to get fixed. And so that is where we are in this perfect time in history that all these things can be set right, where maybe they couldn't have before because we didn't have blockchain, we didn't have cryptocurrency to write the truth. And when you talk about steganography or the spells and it being done with words and how powerful language is, well, coding is language. And yes. So we all, you know, have this opportunity to be a part of this and contribute and have this history, the truth be written with cryptocurrency, and then, you know, validated so that this never has to happen again, and a war can end and the truth can be told to people. And so that's where I was just really excited about this, and I wanted to share more of this stuff and unpack it with you, and then share some good news, and maybe have you do some steganography on the current events as well, if you're up for that.
Oh well. Yeah, other than the Oscars being the obvious one, right?
I'm so over the Oscars. I just can't even take it anymore. I'm like, stop talking to me about that.
Oh, I know. I get that's everybody's clickbait for the last 2 days on the internet. It's just been something about that.
Yeah, couldn't care less.
Well, it's this old adage that my business partner has imparted on me. If there's a nude woman walking down the street, you better be looking the other way to see what you're being distracted from.
Right.
Because something is way out of place here.
Yeah. So, if everyone's talking about it, something else is going on, I promise.
Yeah. It's the stuff that you brought up. That's the significance of it, I think, is that the mind control haze is trying to be pumped out so much here.
Yeah.
In the light of all this. I mean, Russia's pulling out of the Ukraine. What's the narrative going to be? they're backing out. They got what they came for. They're probably going to reestablish a zone in the Donbass, just like they did in Georgia. It was hilarious with all my friends like a month ago. I said they're going to go by the same playbook as they have been for the last 20 years with this area. They don't even have the resources. This is what people don't even realize about that. Do you think they have enough resources to just extend their borders as much as what Ukraine was? They're barely going to be able to pull off this world reserve currency move. I think they're going to be able to, but they got to conserve themselves for that. There's no way that they were going to overextend themselves and get that border grab.
Oh, I mean, I think the world reserve currency thing is definitely happening. They have all the toys.
Well, and mechanism. What they did, which is going to be proven to be the brilliant move for a long time, is they did a tripartite pegging. So there is an equivalency of gold to a gram of gold to oil and convertible to rubles. And so
they'll take Bitcoin for it.
They'll also take Bitcoin for it, which is convertible off of their gold standard, actually, is what they're based backed on. They already trade with Venezuela with their petro crypto. They have since 2018. So they're already transacting with Venezuela in oil. But they've got so the reserves of Venezuela backed by them. They've got, probably China has no choice but to get involved with them because of the food crisis that befell. So that's why the the Belt and Road Initiative isn't even a thing anymore, and they're having to get on board with this. But it being pegged to those three things is really, really brilliant, because it actually creates a propensity for natural arbitrage to happen if they're pegged in a way that's verified. And this is because the exchange rate between those three might vary by pennies or cents. And this is the way markets before Glass-Steagall was broken always made money, is you would have to arbitrage the trades. And so for the last 20 years, the derivatives and the credit default swaps have just added up on the back of the Glass-Steagall embargo being lifted. But now you'll have countries having no choice but to do this either, because they need the energy.
There's no other option for them. Well, and even the Canadian pipeline is being shut down because over 1,000 feet of it, or 1,000, I think it was feet of it, are being having to be redone because the concrete is crumbling on it. So, there's no other option. They have all the toys, like they have all the, the game is in their yard, everyone has to go to them.
Yeah.
So,
and they've just proved they're not to be messed with. Don't mess with me. And, it's still my contention that, it's really funny to me that it's only proven further that the United States military owes no allegiance to the administrators. And, we've got better toys than anybody anyway. That's what's coming out of all this. Everybody's worried about nukes and all this kind of stuff. Probably not in this community, but man, around Phoenix.
Oh, really?
Armies are like, nuclear war, and nobody's gonna mess with us with what we've got. No. First of all, in orbit, and second of all, just with the arsenal of space tech. I digress. It's interesting. All of this is coming out by way of Mr. Putin here. He's cleaning shop.
I think it's really incredible. Yeah.
And it goes back years. That's what I've been following his little, pretty much ever since this 2014 Minsk agreements that didn't get adhered to. He's been stacking chips. He's been playing the long poker game.
Oh, let me show one other. Oh, wait a minute. Is it coming out? Oh, no. Okay, here it is.
Oh, this is the one from earlier, yeah.
Yeah, hold on one second.
And so you verified this is from earlier this morning?
The second part. Sorry, where they lost the so yesterday they said the FBI had lost Hunter's laptop.
Right. Or the information included in it.
Yes.
And, the image.
And there's been an update. So there's some good news here. I don't know why.
Well, it's been a quick journey of that. A couple of weeks ago, there was no laptop, and then now there's a laptop, and now all of a sudden they have the information from the laptop. So it's progressing quickly. At least we're not waiting, years and months like we used to have to wait for this stuff. It's going out.
Says oversight of the FBI's cyber division. It does not say anything. Well, right, but I mean, this is a cyber asset. This is a point of vulnerability. If there are passwords, if there are business deals, if there are references to things that could harm our country, like you can't even sit here right now and say that that there's not a point of vulnerability. Maybe there are other crimes, maybe there are tax issues or whatever, but as it relates to is the first family sufficient cyber infrastructure to protect? You don't even know if they're compromised. Tell you what, Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record of this committee the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, which I'm in possession of.
Wow.
Silence. Nobody knows what to do. Confer.
Yeah. Quick reaching for their earpiece. What do I do?
Remember the I can't say no objection.
I've never had.
I will object pending further investigation.
What's the basis of that objection?
It's a unanimous consent request, and I object pending.
Very well. I have a subsequent question. Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the receipt.
It may very well be
from the Mac shop.
It may very well be entered into the record after we look at it further.
Very well, Mr. Chairman, I have a subsequent unanimous
right
consent.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the receipt from the Department of
Mr.
Justice
Chairman, this is
to
Ms.
the
Demi.
Mac shop.
Am I next, or am I next?
Without objection.
Panic. Panic. Remember the crypto viewing guys saw I don't know why. Well, I know why. Now my streaming is like super.
Are you
glitchy.
talking about the ones in the hallway that Dick was seeing?
Yeah.
Yes.
The money.
And all squeaking and all that.
Yeah.
So it was.
Yeah, you just started glitching out a little, Lisa. Right on schedule. Right on schedule.
They got me, and I'm hardwired into my. I'm not Wi-Fi. I'm not using Wi-Fi, so there's no reason I should be glitching. Turn my juice back up, guys. Anyway, so that was some other really great news today.
It's quite the development. Here we go. It's interesting how Trump is wielding the V, as you just said, with his hole-in-one with the 5s all over it. But I'm not convinced that he's not in with his buddy Tom Brady on some things, and the rigging of the NFL and all this is actually very, very, very key to look into as well, as it points out what we're about to get into.
That's new to me. Would you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. You are the one that brought up gematria for starters, right? So gematria is actually something that a lot of people on the internet are onto as it relates to the NFL, just because the pattern recognition is pretty interesting. Like, when you put a player's name in and their birth date, they'll throw for as many yards that day as they are days from their birthday, for instance, right? Like stuff like that. It'll be like 123 days until this person's birthday. They rushed for 123 yards and their name equals 123. And so they're all of these lineup characteristics just in the pattern recognition, for one, that you can find. And people are making a lot of money betting against the NFL because they've discovered the gematria patterns underneath it. To the point where they're like 80% up on Vegas. It's still not a perfect science, of course, because you've got to have the further decoder ring to see the meaning of it all, to really grasp like what's happening there. But stadiums themselves are really, the bread and circus of Rome is the bread and circus of now. It's very odd that all of the stadiums are placed on the exact juncture of these key ley line points, capturing energy to transmit down into it. There are 100,000 people screaming down, and this result creates a psychic impulse effect. And you also have a lot of different things with sports too. You have a lot of different archetypes. You have a lot of numbers on the players themselves, their names. So, if you want a lions and tigers and bears, Wizard of Oz type of ritual, you have your pieces there, just as a for instance, right? And so when you break all this stuff down as it relates to the V steganography and how it relates to Trump and how it relates to our current, our latest Super Bowl situations, here's a good one for you. Super Bowl 52. Super Bowl 52 was the Eagles, and it was I think it was the Patriots. It was the Eagles and the Patriots. Yes, that's who it was. And I always only remember the winner of that one, it seems, because the reason it matters is because it was Super Bowl 52 in Minnesota. Minnesota has been identified as one of these key places in the battle for things that we don't really realize is happening, because underneath all of the land claim of the United States, with who owns everything, the land, the mafia that is installed here has created all of this real estate programs, all these, even when you get down to like urban layer stuff, the opportunity zone crisis and scams that all exist there. It's all based on even the land ownership of the national park system is it's owned by the government. It's really not owned by anybody, or shouldn't be, right? Well, there's a thing called the Kensington Runestone, and the Kensington Runestone was an artifact that was found near the turn of the last century, the late 1800s. And the Kensington Runestone is an artifact of the ancient past, and these runestones used to exist in order to claim territories. This is what you would do when you were an explorer: is you would put down your legal claim on it, you would bury it in a specific location, and make markings, make reference to that. So when you took it back to the authorities, maybe your king, whoever that you owed allegiance to, maybe it wasn't even a governing body that you did, but just for the legal aspect of it, you would be able to replicate and point to it. If ever needing to go back and claim, okay, here it is. And we pull it up. And then once there's enough established authority there, you set boundaries. But the way that you would claim land in the ancient past was anything that touched a water tributary would get you ownership of that surrounding land to, I forget how many hectares of radius it was out from, like if you were to put a claim at the head of a river, and that river, for instance, streamed into 4 branches and other branches, you would own a certain amount of land on either side of the river. It's just because the river, quote unquote, touched it, right? So the key thing with the Kensington Runestone and where it's placed is it's a very strategically located item that was found and infers ownership or claim on this land that stretches back to 1392 with the Templars or the Vikings, or whatever you want to call them. And this was placed at such an area of strategic finding that everything, because Minnesota is the land of lakes. all of where the glacier used to sit, there are all these tributaries and main water veins that come off of it. Just its placement alone there, like I think it claims basically like 70% of the landmass of the United States just by its placement there.
Wow.
And so there's this whole thing around who actually has arbitership over the land. And how far back does that go? It certainly goes further back than Christopher Columbus and his claim on things, and even Spain's. And this is the very first claim, other than the natives that were here, on there being anybody here in order to make that claim on the land. So think about how that relates with banking and ownership of things. You have something take place in Super Bowl 52. Back to the Super Bowl thing and why Minnesota is significant, though. You have Prince performing that year. It was the last year he performed, of course, before he died. And purple is a key color anyway. It's the color of the crown chakra. And whenever you find that deep violet purple, it's the controlling of the signal that's coming through your crown chakra. Blue or purple and gold, specifically when they're tied together like that, like the Minnesota Vikings colors are, they mean the same thing. The gold strand, the purple strand, it's the same metaphysical characteristic from the spiritual sense. But the thing about the Minnesota's stadium is that it's completely made out of glass, right? And you also have a curious sponsorship arrangement because as it relates,
their stadium is made out of glass. I'm sorry, what?
The stadium is completely made out of glass. It's a big
public. You just did that whole thing. What were we seeing? That big glass. Remember
steeple.
The glass, the Crystal Palace of the World's Fairs.
The World's Fairs,
which was the largest building at the time, which was basically impossible to build. They couldn't get 200,000 glass panels built or transported from hundreds of miles away in one piece with the technology.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a cool anecdote. I didn't hear.
I wonder if those two things are tied together.
We were talking about the use of possibly hidden ancient technologies or knowledge that we don't have today, which was basically one of the only ways that they could have moved hundreds of thousands of giant glass panels in from hundreds of miles away. They calculated there was a certain amount of glass blowing places, glass foundries within X amount of miles of these places, and it was just basically impossible to do at the time. And it was, like I said, the largest structure, the largest building on Earth.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's connected or not anyway, but but that's, again, something to consider with tying things together. But back to the ritual of this banking ritual, as we'll find out it is, because US Bank is literally plastered right on the side of this glass building. You start to draw some other corollaries and interesting happenstances from the fact that the Eagles won it. The thing is that Philadelphia is the keystone state. And when the keystone falls out, everything comes toppling down. So this is the first part of this consideration to put into this, is Philadelphia's inclusion there. And then there's also some stuff, as we're talking about World War II, the Eagles actually had to change their name during World War II for 1 year because of such a heavy, as it was said, like a heavy influx of the players from Pennsylvania going into the military. The Pittsburgh Steelers and the Philadelphia Eagles had to merge in 1943 for one season, and they called themselves the Steagles. So now you have the glass stadium that the Super Bowl is being played in US Bank Stadium. So you're looking for banking related things, and you have the Eagles, who were the Steagles in 1943. And like we mentioned earlier in this broadcast, the Glass-Steagall Act, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission rule to the exceptions put in place after the Great Depression, that banks could not participate in market making. They couldn't invest in things. They were a lender. That was basically what that was, to separate lending from investing, and especially investing back in yourself. But of course, the whole banking system comes apart. This is pretty much part of the whole Road to Ruta thing, right? Where once Glass-Steagall comes apart, things start to cascade. Well, what do you find in the halftime show this year? And that's in that Super Bowl. But you had, I think it was Shakira and J-Lo. And J-Lo was dancing as Silver, as the main performer, dressed all silver, and Shakira was the backup drums, the gold, the backup, right? She was the backstop for the gold. And there, right on stage, as it zooms out, you get the Emerald City collapsing into Niagara Falls, and a Tesla coil comes up through the bottom of the floor. And this is this whole Wizard of Oz Road to Ruta tie-in, right? And you've got the Emerald City represented by the mind control falling away, and the new paradigm with the Tesla coil coming up through the bottom. Of course, Niagara Falls is there too, also a Tesla thing. He invented the hydroelectric generator at Niagara Falls. So there's this inference of that. And then you also have this Colombian rapper guy come in, and he's wearing a black sweatshirt with a colored flower. Just like in the Road to Ruta comic book, the black drops that are tears of oil that come out of the colored flower. This Colombian rapper, that I forgot what the guy's name is, coming out on stage, and he has that representation he's rapping with. So you see all this banking collapse ritual stuff. The Glass-Steagall Super Bowl is what I call it, because it's ritualizing what they're doing in the money markets. It's all part of the magic V, the control of your senses. So that's my guess is with this stuff is if they can make the actual magic that they're doing with the money and the manipulation happen behind the scenes, make it palatable to you, because you got something entertaining out of it, that somehow we're moving along. The Overton window, as they call it, is moving so quickly along with people's consciousness that it dumbs them down to it entirely, is my guess, is how some of these effects work.
It's preconditioning, all that kind of stuff, like we saw with 9/11 and The Simpsons and Spider-Man and Superman comics going back to the early 80s and even to late 70s. Yeah.
Yep.
That's
right.
You're blowing my mind, man. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Amen.
So I mean, well, even this year, take this year. So really apparent this year. Have you noticed the colors, the blue and the gold for this year?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and the Ukrainian whole situation that transpired right afterward, it was this perfect blending in. You know, this whole history that we're fighting is one of our Aryan past. We're all Aryans. We are all part of the Aryan haplogroup. If we are Anglo-Saxon in any sort of a way, we have that derivation in our bloodline that goes all the way back to before the Younger Dryas. They called it Hyperborea. And this was the precursor to the Tartarian Empire, was Hyperborea. This is where the Nordic people hearken from. And there's before Younger Dryas stuff to get back to, but why were they called Aryans in the first place? And that has to do with Mars, right? The Aries, the red planet. It goes way, way back, like 300,000 years or so when they arrived here. But there you have the Aryan ram represented with the rams. It's the zodiac sign for the Aryans. And you have them winning Super Bowl 56. And the ultimate 56 ritual that we have at play is Catherine Austin Fitz's FASB 56 realization, right? There's actually a lot of stuff tied in with that. But the one from last year is where you get a lot of the V steganography making full circle with Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl 55, 5-5. And what the Templars have to do with the V steganography itself as the ones who really know what the truth of Jesus and Christ is, his historical significance. And this has to do with a whole diatribe that we needn't get into, because I've done presentations on this in the past. You guys can look into it. I'll send you links after if you really want to. But Super Bowl 55 being a home game for the first time ever for a team, it was weird. The last two Super Bowls were home games, and they were both won by the home team. They were played in their home stadium, starting with last year's, which was all about the truth that is held down there in the Caribbean, Atlantis rising. This is why the Templars went down there in the first place. Vikinger, the word Vikinger literally translates in Norwegian to pirate. So Viking is Templar is pirate. It's really their standard that they flew. The Jolly Roger was a brazen, middle finger in the face of the Catholics to say they got the truth of Christ from Jerusalem. And the truth of Christ was that they found his ossuary. They found his family's ossuary, Mary Magdalene, his children, and all of his descendants in this ossuary that was right there at the Temple Mount that they were excavating. And that's just so happens how you actually store a person in an ossuary. Is the way it works is you put a person out into the broad sun in the daylight in the middle of this donut shaped mound, and the sunlight eats away and decays the flesh, and in that way you give yourself back to the sun, and then you're left with bones. And then once the bones are there, the keeper of the ossuary comes into the middle, collects the bones, and arranges them in a box and puts them on a wall alongside the catacomb inside of this donut. So you can store many, many, many people in this way. And the only way to make it work in the most economic way possible is to put 2 femur bones on the top as the last 2 items, and then the skull on top of that. So that in and of itself is steganography, and always has been. When the Templars allied themselves with the Vatican, it was only for the archaeological significance of what they were able to extract from the Temple Mount and from Jerusalem during the Crusades. It was an artifact finding mission. And so what is it that the Templars messaging really conveys through the V stuff? I mean, well, that's pretty much what my work covers. And so I don't want to cover too much here, because I can talk at long length about this stuff. But I can send you the videos where I've covered specific Super Bowls too, that goes into further depth about this stuff other than surface level.
Yeah, no, your work
like
is
that.
amazing. And I really enjoyed, getting to meet you. And getting to talk with you about a lot of this stuff. It was really interesting. So I loved having you on. I hope you'll come back on again and we can have some more conversations.
As long as I hope I didn't overtalk you too, Lisa.
No, man.
No,
I got two pages of notes here. I'm gonna further research on stuff. Yeah, you're blowing my mind away. You're absolutely talking our language. Our audience loves this stuff, and you're bringing a lot of content and a lot of information that I had no idea existed. And this is certainly going to help broaden my efforts to learn more about time and place and where we are and where we're going. So I definitely thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet. And to mention, you've got my YouTube channel up there. I no longer post anything to YouTube, everybody. It's archived up to like a year and a half ago.
Oh, okay.
But my stuff started to get, it wouldn't even process after,
so
after
then you
some
go
point.
to
You
your
weren't
theta
even processing
here?
my videos. So I just stopped doing it. You can find me live on theta.tv/skullcapsavant is the URL that I have a live broadcast of these presentations always playing. That's a little bit harder to digest in one sitting because it's a 7-day marathon of content. So you watch it in key chunks and then you can go watch the individual episodes over. Actually, on Brighteon is where I archived everything now. So I just recently got all my Patreon stuff publicized for the public on Brighteon, so people can even watch all that stuff and catch up if they want.
I haven't even heard of Brighteon.
Yeah, no, that's a new one to me too.
Brighteon is kind of like Rumble, I guess. They just don't have streaming yet. They're more like Odyssey maybe than they are Rumble.
So they're a blockchain project?
They are not a blockchain project.
Oh.
They have a distributed ledger coin, but it's not a blockchain coin. Neither is Odyssey.
Okay.
Odyssey's isn't a blockchain coin either.
Oh.
It's a liquidity thing.
Okay. Interesting. Well, you guys can find him. I've got a link to, I have a link to your YouTube channel. So the best way to find you is I'll go and add this Theta streaming link as well in the description to make sure they can find you. Theta's
a different platform. I don't even know if a lot of people know that it is live and has a community and is attempting to.
And you're going to help me get my streaming key on Theta.
Yes.
I tried it one time and I was really struggling, but you said you'd help me.
It takes some doing. I'll help you for sure. And I already talked to some people for you and Jenny both.
Oh, cool.
And so,
thank you.
We'll get there. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. I love Theta. Go Theta, go Theta, go Theta, go. We know a guy that has a song like that. So
I've heard that before somewhere. Sounds familiar.
Heard that song. Yeah. All right. Well, Ben, thank you so much.
Also, incidentally, what Josh was trying to share with Bix is say, Bix, what the heck, dude? Aren't you? And he's like, no. Bix still isn't wise to this stuff quite yet, completely. I talked to him a little bit about it when he was here in town, but anyway, now you're aware.
Yes, Bix has his story and he's sticking to it, and we've all learned a lot from him. So, but I think it's really interesting to hear how things all fit together. You know, you're validating the road to Ruta, you're validating the gematria stuff, you're validating, all these different stories through this steganography. I think I said it right that time.
Yeah.
Or closer. So we're all learning together and figuring this stuff out, and the truth is coming out because of that. And I think that's the part that really excites me. It's the more we can see the truth together, and
it wouldn't be fun otherwise. I like puzzles. I don't like stuff to come easy. So.
Yeah, I never thought I did, but I'm sure I love figuring stuff out or seeing something, and the gears start turning. And I feel like you gave us another tool to now. But I'm really cued in on the Z thing. I think the Z thing is the next step.
See what you can find out. Apply steganography to Z. And just see where your mind takes you. That'll be a fun exercise, I think.
Yeah.
Very cool. Good idea.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on, Lisa. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. We'll see you guys all. Actually, tomorrow we'll be traveling, and I've got a bunch of doctor appointments with Canon, so we'll be off. But we'll be back for happy hour, and we'll be at Nana's. So we'll have Nana on with us for happy hour, and we'll have a big day. So love to you all, and have a great day.